Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and today's Should You Pull video for Dissidia Opera Omnia. We're going to be taking a little trip down memory lane with Final Fantasy X and Braska's release. So Braska's going to be turning up in Dissidia Opera Omnia alongside Jecht's upgrades, and that means that people who want to can start using Braska, Jecht and Auron as a party that's actually fairly cohesive within itself. But Braska's got a couple of things missing from his kit that we would have really liked to have seen. So if you'd like to learn more about Jecht and Braska, and of course the event that comes along with them, then stay tuned and keep on watching. Before we get started, of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box down below, including my Twitter, my Twitch, my Discord. Definitely come and check out Discord. We have loads of conversations about Dissidia, Final Fantasy in general, and loads of other games. So if you'd like to come and join in the conversation with that, click on the link in the description box down below. And of course, if you want to come and find me clearing all Opera Omnia stages and streaming all sorts of other things, then you can come find me on Twitch as well. Now, next week, I probably won't be streaming all too much because I'm actually going to be in Amsterdam for TwitchCon, but if I can, then I obviously will. Over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a brand new video, and today that person is going to be Gravekeepers4, who has joined on the Ultima Patron tier, and a massive thank you goes out to you for that. And much like me, big fan of Final Fantasy V, as you've given me the opportunity to draw Kryl, which is wonderful. Thank you ever so much for your support, and to all of my other patrons for their support as well. And if you're interested in getting lots of benefits, just like the title card you see here, then consider clicking on the link in the description box below for that as well. And of course, lastly, don't forget to check out all the other content creators and resources out there for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia as well. So let's first off take a look at the banner that we're going to be looking at when it comes out on Friday. So the banner that we're going to be looking at here is going to be the last chance to grab Kain BT. So like if I'm going to be pulling on here, it's going to be to try and get Kain BT here. It's going to contain LD kits for Braska, of course, Jecht and Ignis, and then finally Braska's own FR. So before we go into Jecht and Braska, Ignis being here with Force enhancements is actually kind of the reason I decided against going in on Penello when she came around, because I actually just like the way Ignis plays slightly more because he's more aura based, he has more options, and him having Force enhancements is actually very relevant to his kit because he's able to charge it very easily. He's now got more turn manipulations from when he got his C90. I just enjoy Ignis's kit quite a lot, so I will probably invest in his Force enhancements if I get the chance. So we're going to start by taking a look at Jecht here and the updates that he gets. So of course a big thank you goes out to Mediu for their translations over on Reddit for this information. Now Jecht gets a rework here, but it's not a huge one, certainly not in comparison to his C90. Beast Rush gets additional HP dumps in it, which brings it in line with his other skill as well. So you're getting the double attack from Jecht Slash, and then Beast Rush is getting more HP dumps and his high turn rate as well, so that they're both breaking even with each other. So this is useful because of the fact that this is the ability that actually has his re-break on it as well, which means you can get a pretty hefty amount of damage out of Jecht if you know what buttons to press. His LD, which is what gives him his buff and the ability to get his re-breaks, etc., turns into a quadruple HP dumping attack with AoE 100% damage, and also unbreaks the enemy halfway through the ability, similarly to how Vayne's Force of Will attack works. So if you break an enemy, you'll then unbreak them and then break them again, so that you get 2 lots of delay. You'll still only get the 1 extra turn out of it, but it's still a nice thing to note. His C90, however, is really nice because it makes his Meteor Shot have 8 HP dumps in it, and bear in mind that one of the abilities he gets from his LD enhancement is the ability to retain bravery after he's done HP damage. So this is going to hit very hard, and you get a free skill use out of it. And then obviously, because this is what you want to be using at the tail end of a free turn you got from a break, you'll probably find you're dealing a lot of damage very quickly. The thing with Jecht is that he is a damage dealer. We have a lot of those, and I think that if you haven't invested in, say, Prish or Sephiroth or something like that, there is argument to be made for you to invest in Jecht if you happen to already have his BT. You could green him. I'm not a big fan of the effects of his BT plus. It doesn't add HP damage cap up, which is a shame, and it doesn't really have any kind of major gimmicks. It's just more bravery damage, or all it really equates to for the party. So it's not my favourite. But, you know, getting 12 HP dumps off of Beast Rush into Meteor Shot is not something to sniff at. So if you like Jecht, then yeah, there's definitely argument to be made to invest in him. But if you don't want to be locked out of fire damage, because everything he does is fire damage and he enchants himself with fire, then maybe you might want to consider a more open-ended damage dealer. So now, of course, let's take a little look at Braska's kit as well. So Braska is an Aurabot damage dealer hybrid. His auras are nothing huge to write home about, but he does have a lot of versatility in his kit. For starters, he has Curaga, which is exactly what it says on the tin. It recovers HP for the party, but it's instant turn rate and a free turn, which means he has a way of charging the FR gauge very quickly if you need him to. He also gets free skill uses off of some of his other stuff, so you'll be able to use this on occasion just to charge the FR gauge realistically. And then his second skill, Ultima, is just a damage dealing attack that gives him his generic buff. So you get 3 HP dumps with split damage. It's nothing particularly special. His EX is very interesting. So his EX basically charges slightly differently to other characters, because while you have his EX passive on, he gets Overdrive, which is a special effect that charges his EX gauge by instantly when you fill it up by 5 turns, after every 5 turns. And you also get an enhanced version of the EX for doing it. So you get fire when you use the Jecht shot, you get fire resist down, more fire damage, 5 HP dumps if you're using the plus version, 3 HP dumps if you're not. So realistically, you will always be using the plus version of this unless you happen to get the non-plus version because you've saved it for whatever reason. But the overdrive effect gives him a stack of up to 5, and then at 5 turns, he then immediately gets his EX filled up, and then he can use True Jecht Shot, at which point it then goes back to 0, and True Jecht Shot Plus becomes regular True Jecht Shot. You also get a free skill use out of this, so it's nice that you can use Curaga off of it as a free way of charging the FR gauge, keeping people healthy, and that's pretty much what comes out of that. So when Grand Summoner's Staff comes into play, you get Fire Enchant, you get Party Brave damage up, Party HP damage up, and you get Jecht Bomber Plus if you've got 5 stacks of the Overdrive as well, which means that you're then going to be able to go off with the EXs and everything as well. You have 5 HP dumps instead of 4 when you get to use Jecht Bomber Plus, but you probably will use your Plus on the EX rather than the LD at any given opportunity because, well, it's free and it recharges quickly enough. Because obviously by using Curaga, you're getting a charge towards your 5 stacks of Overdrive, which then gives you the ability to use True Jecht Bomber, True Jecht Shot Plus again, and then you can just go over again. This is all well and good. Then we get to the FR. The FR, in my opinion, is just a little bit lacking for multiple reasons, not just the obvious ones. So what this does, he partners up with a Mid-Italian, which is very cool, and between them they just start the force time off, and the force time asks for your character's HP to be at 100% or more at the end of the turn, or for a character to have selected a Fire Brave damage command. There are 2 problems with this. However, you do get quite large charges if you do pull it off, at least at this point in time. He doesn't enchant the party fire, which is a major oversight when it comes to Braska, in my opinion, because his auras are like meh. He enchants himself for fire. Yeah, you could take him with other fire damage dealers like Jecht, but if you want to use him in a more widespread fashion, you're going to have to use either Ignis or Lulu or one of their cool abilities, which is not ideal, not in this day and age. Like, Ignis's cool ability is fine, but it doesn't last very long, and Lulu's very, very lineal, like, single-focused thing, which is just to buff Braska, who, in my opinion, is only okay. He's fine if you get that all off, but if you're using characters like Kayn, you can obviously give their cool ability, give Lulu or Ignis their cool ability to him, so that he's constantly dealing fire damage and able to charge the gauge. However, the other problem comes into play with this. You have to select a Fire Brave damage command, which means that off-turn damage isn't going to increase the force gauge for you. So that's the other problem I have with it. It's like, yeah, you get some buff just by being there because you've got HP maxed out, but if you want the absolute most out of him, you're having to jump through a lot of hoops to make what I consider to be a less than stellar character good. And that doesn't scream pull me to me. So now let's take a look at the event that's going to be coming along with Jecht and Braska, of course, which is going to be the next story chapter. And this is going to be a pretty big deal for a lot of players because it's Braska's final Aeon that we're going to be fighting here, and he is an icon, he is a legend, he is the moment, so it's very cool to be able to challenge him. And fun fact, this mission, even now in JP, is kind of the mission that people tend to use instead of Divine Bahamut for how much damage can I deal in a short space of time, and there is good reason for that. So, it says here, big shout outs of course to DissidiaCompendium.com for this info, he starts with 5 million HP, and he does, but don't be misled because this fight can actually be pretty long-winded if you're not prepared for it. You can blitz it very easily by doing a sort of zero boss turn runs and things like that, but there are hoops you'll have to jump through first. So you'll see here that you have summon enemies here, which are the U Pagodas. These have to be dealt with before you can damage Braska's final Aeon at all, and they have to be dealt with. They have 10 million HP each, and you have to beat them before you can damage Braska's final Aeon. Once you've wiped out Braska's final Aeon's HP, the 5 million that's there, he then regenerates with 45 million HP and also revives the U Pagodas, and you're unable to deal with them completely. They will respawn every time you defeat them, which makes them really good target practice for people trying to see how much damage they can do in a short space of time. When it comes to the force mechanics here, as you can see, basically it reduces the amount of bravery damage that he takes based on, unless it's fire damage, based on how far up the gauge he's gone. Very similar to what we saw with Cryle. However, the additional thing here is once he's gone beyond 60% up to 100%, he then deals additional HP damage after his turn, and after they've attacked, you'll get a bit more HP damage dealt to you. During force time, Braska's final Aeon will recover 80% of any damage you deal to him, so it becomes very, very slow if he gets into force time quickly. So it's actually a good idea to kind of just let him do his thing and then carry on so that you're not just beating your head against a wall. He also has some pretty nasty attacks if you're not prepared for them as well. So once you get him down the 5 million HP, he actually unleashes Jecht Bomber Plus before he regenerates, so he removes all of his own debuffs. He then does a Brave HP attack, but all enemies lose a turn, which is never nice to experience. And he also has the access to his Jecht Beam attack, which he does at various HP thresholds, so 89%, 29%, 19%, 9%. So you're going to need some sort of debuff evasion because this move dispels one of your buffs and petrifies you for a turn, which, again, not particularly pleasant. He also will use Jecht Bomber Plus after he goes under 50% HP post his regeneration as well. So you're going to have to deal with Jecht Bomber Plus twice, and you're going to have to deal with Jecht Beam. It can be done very quickly. If you use a BT phase or a summon after he goes beyond his first health bar, he won't use Jecht Bomber Plus and will just regenerate, so you can actually skip one of those entirely. And there are ways of dealing 45 million HP in one burst phase, so if you can do that, you could probably skip most of these mechanics. Most of the carriages you will see here, like, you can absolutely do this with Braska, Jecht, and Oren. Yuna, if you want to throw her in with it as well, they will absolutely work. But the most common carriages you'll probably see here will be carriages like Kayn, Selphie, Garnet again, because you don't necessarily have to deal fire damage to work. It's just going to reduce your bravery damage. So if you're relying on brave gains, somebody like Cryle, for example, you can absolutely get away with that. Warrior of Light's actually very good here as well because he can reduce the frequency of debuffs that are inflicted to him and also protect the party in general. There's loads of characters that you can use. If you don't want to use Oren, you can use Galoof. Ignis obviously has the fire enchant and the debuff evasion, so he's going to be pretty fantastic for this. Porum is going to keep you healthy. Edge does fire damage with his counters. There are lots and lots of options available to you. And in terms of friend unit, Kayn is still going to do you well here. So now, of course, we have Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and tell everyone whether you would pull on this banner or not and why that might be the case. So, as always, a huge thank you goes out to my patrons for their votes and their comments. And if you'd like to be part of the discussion, then consider joining up on Patreon as well. Anyways, let's go straight into some numbers. This banner is interesting. So 10% of people said they're going to use gems here, 15% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets, 40% said less than 100 tickets, and 35% of people said no thank you. So this one's not hugely popular, but the people who feel strongly about this banner feel very strongly about it. So I personally am in the less than 100 tickets camp because I have a good number of tickets. I still want Kane BT, and if there's even the slightest chance that I can get out of Kane's batch without using my burst tokens, I'm going to try and take it. I wouldn't probably use Braska all that much, but hey, he's new, you never know. So let's go into some of the comments. So Kellen says, I still don't have Kane BT, but I'm just going to do the free pull and token the BT. Braska needs a lot to be enabled, and while I have the means to enable him, I just don't see myself using him beyond this event. Not even for the 30 tickets on the Shinryu event, which will be a nightmare to do without a built Braska. I just don't have the patience, at least not until Camlernauts kit. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, this... It's kind of how I feel, but because I got Kryl and Kane quite nicely, you know, they were quite pleasant. I feel like I'm able to just throw a little something at this banner to try and get Kane more than Braska. But if I got Braska, I wouldn't complain. I never look a gift horse in the mouth. And I don't have Jecht LD either, so it's kind of a banner where I could just get something, and it might be quite nice. But yeah, with Camlernaut coming up next, Braska's not looking the greatest in terms of the long term, so he's not my first recommendation. Silverhawk, on the other hand, says, while I might get torched for this, I plan to use gems on Braska, but only up to his LD. My only reason for doing so is my personal philosophy that a brand new character should be built to at least a serviceable level with LD calls. There is, of course, the risk that I may have to pity the LD, that I have enough gems to do so I can still pity Camlernaut when he arrives. And if I'm really lucky, I could get Braska's FR without trying for it. I find that I see it slightly differently. I'm missing quite a lot of LDs in the game in general, because if I don't see me using a character, I just don't pull for them. And I like, even if they're new, I actually did get Sice in the end, but I wouldn't have gone too far out of my way for her, just because I haven't used her since I've gotten her. So to me, the resources I would have spent on them are more valuable to me than having the character. And if some major update happens to that character, then I can always pull for them then. And Braska, to me at this point in time, isn't particularly exciting. I'm kind of just throwing him a bone because Kane BT's there. But I can certainly see where you're coming from with that. With the regards to the FR as well, it's important to note that we don't get enough power stones and high power stones to max out every FR. And I've made my choice with this batch already doing Kryl, so I'm not going to then do Braska, especially when like Kane's there as well. I could do Kane if I wanted to. So we all have to make choices, and I decided that I wanted to pick Kryl over Braska. And then finally Ridley Kemp says, I love FF10, but Braska is barely even a character in it, so I don't have any special attachment to him. Add that to a kit that seems eminently redundant, and I find this one really easy to skip. Sorry, Una. Honestly, there were quite a few comments about disliking the fact that Braska was there at all because characters like Rikku hadn't turned up, who are obviously much, much bigger, popular, and more prevalent characters within the game's story. So it is interesting to see that some of the choices being made are for these very, very niche characters like Braska, but in my mind, I think some people really like that. So let me know in the comments below, do you like the fact that some of these more niche characters are getting attention before some of the bigger ones, so that they're sort of saving the big ones to be a real event as and when they do happen? I find it a very curious thing. Let me know down below. Right, so big question here. Should you be pulling for Braska or Jecht? Honestly, I am pulling on this banner more for Jecht than I am for Braska, if anything. Like, I don't particularly feel the need for either of them, and I'm going to be really honest, I don't actually like Braska very much at all in this game. I think he's very generic in terms of his LD only kit, and I think his FR doesn't really do very well because he doesn't even fulfill his own conditions especially well. Now, don't get me wrong, he is perfectly usable. There are benefits to having Braska. Curaga being frequently free because of his EX, which charges naturally, is solid. It's a nice thing to have. And his EX hits decently hard. He has some party auras, but it just doesn't really amount to an awful lot, if you ask me. Certainly not with the likes of Camlernaut and Tidus round the corner. And because I already have, like, I can only speak for myself here, because I already have an enchant-based FR in Kryl, which actually includes off-turn damage to charge it, I'd much rather use that than Braska, which doesn't, because you have to actually select a command in order to increase the gate, or increase the percentage. Jecht can actually do a lot of damage if he's used correctly. Typically, you'll be using his skill 1 just before his EX goes off, and then you use his EX to deal 12 HP dumps across 2 turns, which is a lot. And his re-break capabilities play well with other FR characters like Gabranth going forward, who like re-breaks. But he has a problem a lot of multi-turn re-break characters have, where unless you build around that with characters like Gabranth or Aranea much later on, taking multiple turns to do the same amount of damage that a character could do in a single turn, or using off-turn damage and not having to take a turn at all, is generally unfavourable because you're ticking down the force time much quicker than you would be if you were using off-turn damage to do it. Like we've seen this with Orin and Galoof, we've seen this with Kayn. That kind of thing works really well, whereas the opposites, so characters like Jecht or like Lightning or anything like that, won't like it as much. Luckily, Jecht EX hits really, really hard, so we have that to be thankful for. Ignis I do actually really like. If you don't already have him, he takes multiple turns in the same way that Jecht does to actually get all his buffs off, but as long as you're not doing that during force time, that's not really a problem these days, because we're not sitting there waiting for a Lufenia roll to tick down. I don't know about you guys though, but sometimes I still sit there and pretend like my natural behaviour during the game is that there is an orb ticking down. It's very strange, but with Ignis it's not as big a problem as it used to be. So as long as you're not doing that during force time, he has healing, enchant in peril, debuff evasion, a little bit of turn manipulation with his EX. He's solid, and he can supercharge the gauge really nicely as well thanks to his force enhancements. So I'm not going to probably pull on here very much, if at all. Like, I mean, I'll probably throw something at it to try and get Kayn BT as a last check. And if you're in that same position, then maybe you might want to do the same. But I certainly wouldn't go too heavily out of my way for Braska because, honestly, I just think he's a bit bland. So that's going to be all for today's video. Next week we're going to be doing a combined video for Camelot Naught's event, which is going to be a big one, and we're also going to talk about Desh and his event coming up. And I'm going to combine these into one video because I'm going to be away for the majority next week, or I might do 2 separate videos and upload them one after the other, because we're also going to get Machina C90 with that, and that's no joke either. So we've got lots of cool stuff to look forward to in the next couple of weeks as well. So yeah, let me know what you think. Are you going to be pulling for Braska? Do you enjoy his kit more than maybe I do or some of my patrons do? Then let me know in the comments below. Thank you ever so much for watching, and take care, beautiful, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.